Being a father myself, I already know how incredibly tough those first months are. What was that period like for you, being a new father and getting sober?
My addiction was just taking over. My brain was constantly focused on having another drink, no matter the situation that my wife felt, my son was dealing. It just didn't matter, and that's the real ugly truth of addiction.
Were you able to like talk to anyone about what you were going through?
The problem with addiction is that it warps your mind in a way that you truly believe that you are alone and you can't talk to anyone. I got to a place where I had a son on the way. I have a beautiful wife, but I thought for myself, they'd be better off without me. Started having some really, really dark thoughts. I couldn't function in like a daily society anymore. My mom, and my sister had came and we were supposed to go out to lunch one day. I finally met them at a lunch and apparently had some very low level seizures. And the next thing I know is I'm waking up in my bedroom and there's like multiple police officers in there. And
Hello, listeners. Just a quick note before we dive into today's episode. In the first few minutes, you might notice a significant drop here and there in the sound. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to get this rectified. However, I still decided to publish the episode because it's powerful, filled with gems that I know you'll appreciate. Thank you for your understanding, and let's get into it. Jeremy, I'm excited to get into this conversation with you today. Not only because I'm excited to see you build your brand and how you're going about building your clothing brand and also the story behind it, but more so because you're also a fellow dad. Now,
yes,
I know it's been, yeah. So big ups to all the dads out there one time. Um, and I know it's been a couple weeks since Father's Day has passed. Um, but I was kind of interested in knowing, like I wanted to start the conversation off there because I'm just curious to know, like, if you can remember, how was your last Father's Day? Like, how did you spend it?
well, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. It's always good to talk to it with you. So I'm excited for our conversation today. And this last Father's Day, it was super chill. I don't. There are so many holidays now. I feel that I just enjoy spending some really low key time with my family. So nothing major. Just spending time with my son. He's just a little over 2 years old, and then of course my wife. And yeah, just a relaxing family time. Try to take a break from the office, from production and working and just really just be with my family. It was nice.
Yeah. Oh, nice, nice. I mean, now that you just said that, I'm wondering, do you find that difficult to disconnect sometimes from work when like you have so much that you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I'm with my family, I do my best to like leave. For instance, if I'm going home, I live very close to my home. So, or sorry, I work very close to my home. So, throughout the day, I'll take breaks and go spend time with my family. Just because one of the ideas of starting a business and owning my own company was to be able to spend more time with my family, and it's interesting because it requires so much more time than a standard 9 to 5 or whatever you want to call it would. But when I'm going home with my family, I'll often leave my phone in the car or in my bedroom or away from me, because I've found if I have my phone on me, notifications or orders or whatever's coming in, it really easily distracts me, and I'll start to get anxious of like these things I have to do. So when I'm with my family, I try to be as present as possible. It's not always possible to not to completely disconnect from business, but I really do the best that I can so I can have quality time with them. But it's a balance, and like throughout my day, I try to structure it in a way where morning time is orders, production, really deep work, get as much done as I can, so that if I'm spending time with my family, I'm more focused with them, and then I always know that I'm coming back here later on in the day as well. So I do my best, but it's a balance.
Yeah. No, I can definitely vibe with that because since I, took the jump to go full time on this entrepreneurial path, again, you go into this with the intention, with the goal of being able to spend more time with family. And I must say I am spending a lot more time, with the kids because of I can determine my own hours. But there was a period where I felt like my weekends were also just being consumed by work and ideas and just wanting to get as much done as possible. And I realized that I needed to kind of take my foot off of the brakes as well, and make a conscious decision that even though I am building this business, this brand, I can use my weekends. I should use my weekends to properly disconnect and recharge for the next week. Because I mean, I'm not sure how that has been for you, but if you've gone through periods where you're like working almost 7 days a week, that the following week you're completely like low on energy, drained. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because on one aspect of owning a business, it allows me the flexibility and freedom. So I have my day structured in a way where, I spend the morning with my family. I come to the office, I go back to my family, I come back to the office, I go to the gym, I come back to the office. I'm kind of
Yeah,
going all over the place, but there is that freedom in it. But at the same time, and I think any entrepreneur would understand that like you are going to work more than on any other thing in your life. I mean, there's no way around it. And so, it's pretty typical where I will work 7 days a week. On the weekends, it's much less, but it's almost impossible for me to completely disconnect. So I think really
yeah,
focusing on like making sure that I'm healthy, I'm getting enough sleep, I'm eating well, I'm going to the gym. When I'm with my family, it's quality time. Like those things allow me to stay charged enough, to where I can manage all of it. But the weekends, I certainly reserve more time for just relaxing and being with my family, and taking every now and then taking a long 3-day weekend where we'll go somewhere
yeah,
local and just really disconnect. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's it's balance. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. I want to share a moment with you,
mm,
and I want to share this moment because I'm curious to know how you've experienced this. And this is coming back to where we started this conversation with Father's Day and everything. So this last Father's Day, I woke up, the kids came up on my bed, and they gave me their little handmade gifts, which was super adorable.
yeah, that's
And
sweet.
then yeah, and then shortly after, they told me, okay, you can come downstairs now. My wife said so as well, and she told me she had made a small little montage, a little video, for me. And I sat down there, Jeremy, and I watched this video, and tears literally started running down my face. Not because of the gesture; the gesture itself was nice, but I often would have this feeling that I don't feel like I'm being a good enough father. And even though deep down I know that's probably not true, it was still very nice to see, like those footage that, you made years ago throughout the years that really depict you or depict me in this situation being a good father. And so I was wondering, do you ever have that where you're like, am I being a good enough father? Like, how has that been for you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think that I've done a lot of thinking about this because I do feel like that often. Like, am I doing enough? Am I putting enough time in the day? And I think that it's really common for all fathers to feel that way. What I tell myself when that's happening is that I have two ways to go about the rest of my life. Like I can continue building a business that's a passion of mine, or I can get a job that I'm less happy with but will provide more of a structure. But at the end of the day, what I want to be for my son is a really good example. And so I always tell myself, like when I'm feeling those things, I tell myself, like, if I'm not doing this right now, and if I'm not building something that's bigger than myself, you know, one, what example does that show to my son? And two, the alternative to it is just, I don't know. This is such a good question. I'm having a hard time putting it into context, but when you create a business, you want to create something, you want to build something you're passionate around, and you want to be able to lead by example. As a father, I'm a father of a young
Yeah.
son, And, that was something that was missing in my life. Like, my family has always struggled in every aspect of life. Growing up, I always struggled with money, always struggled with, addiction. And we can talk about all that stuff later. But, I everything that has been good in my life has been extremely hard to do. And it's really easy to feel like I'm not doing enough and that I'm not a good father. But at the end of the day, I do spend time with my son, a quality time, and I am creating an example which I believe will be impactful on his life. And it's so interesting because my wife creates videos like that every now and then as well, of our travels or our
Mm.
life or of our son. And it reminded me of, we have our own idea of who we are, but every individual person sees us as something completely different, right? They all have their own perspective. And I think when your wife created that video of you and it brought you to tears, she created a video of her perspective of who you are, the man that you are, the father that you are. And that's everything, right? So it's like your family's perception of who you are is what really matters, because what I think people think of me is not what they think of me, because we all are just living in our own little matrix, and our own
Yeah.
ideas. So, a very long-winded answer, but it's a big question, and it's something I struggle with. But I try to really just keep a positive mindset, and just every single day, our brand is one day, ODAAT Apparel, one day at a time. Every day, did I do the best that I could that day in every aspect? And if the answer is yes, then I can go to bed easy.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, there's no good or wrong answer when it when it comes to that question. Um because like you said, like everyone experiences it different, and I love how you phrase it with the perception that your family has of you, like your immediate family, like that's what really counts versus, sometimes the way we may perceive ourselves. Um oh man, that was so good. Oh yeah, and I also like what you said in terms of, leading by example. That's also something that has been on the foreground that I'm also teaching my son and my daughter as well now. And this journey for me has also been one of, what I found myself doing was telling my son, like I want him to do what makes him happy,
Hmm.
right? And that also made me reflect the times I would tell him that last year with, am I doing the things that makes me happy? And that's why I love that you brought up lead by example, because I'm not saying that everyone should do this, only if you have the means and you have the space, the bandwidth. But that's why I also took the plunge and said, let me pursue something that I've been, super interested in doing, and that makes me happy and brings me joy, so that I can be that example for him, and him not say, yeah, but dad, you've been telling me this all of the time, but you haven't been doing the same thing. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I love how you put that.
Well, and also too, like,
uh
happiness, like from my perspective, happiness is so many different things. I think
mm,
sometimes happiness is kind of happiness sometimes is kind of like overdone, right? Like, happiness in many
mhm.
aspects, like, I'm doing what makes me happy, but that doesn't mean that it's not extremely difficult or that it doesn't have its challenges, or some
True.
days are just absolutely terrible. So, like, I really, for me and in my recovery, I try to focus on contentment. Am I content? Am I making a difference? Am I doing something positive? Does it make me happy? Yes. But for me, like, happiness hasn't been the end goal. Like, I enjoy being happy, but happiness is fleeting, because from one moment I'm happy and business is going well, and the next moment I'm not, but I'm content with the work that I'm putting into it.
Yeah. No, I like that. I remember I heard someone said, happiness, you should just view it as enjoying the passage of time.
Mm,
And when they said that, I thought that's an amazing way to stay present in the moment,
yeah.
and enjoy this passing of time, because you're not going to get this time back.
Yeah.
Um, so, on the topic of you being a father, because now you have a son, he's 2 years old, and you are also, if I'm not mistaken, you're also closing in on your 2 year journey of sobriety.
Yes.
And I know you touched base on it a bit, saying that you had your own struggles, coming up, struggling with addiction and whatnot.
Mm.
And so, if you're closing in on 2 years and your son is already 2, that means you started your sobriety journey shortly after you got a fresh newborn baby.
Mm.
And, being a father myself who didn't have to struggle with, an addiction,
Yeah.
I already know how incredibly tough those first months are and even first year. So take me back there, Jeremy. What was that period like for you, being a new father and getting sober?
So this is probably one of the hardest parts of my recovery journey that I talk about, but the reality is so I had a little bit of sober time and I was feeling really good. And because I felt really good, I convinced myself I could just have one drink and be like everyone else, all the normies who
Mm,
can just like enjoy a glass of wine or two at dinner. And so, I did that, and I did that in secret. And very quickly after doing that, I was on a extreme downward spiral into addiction that lasted probably close to a year. And during this time, it was really interesting because we found out that my wife was pregnant, and so I had all these. For me, I'm an alcoholic. So, and for people who deal with addiction issues, they'll understand the idea of saying, "Okay, now my wife's pregnant, so that was my last time. That secret is safe with me. That's it." Then a few days later, it's not. Then it's like, okay, then the first trimester, I'll get sober, and then okay, and so on and so on and so on. And at the end, it got really, really bad, and I've had to do a lot of work to forgive myself because there's a lot of guilt and shame that surrounds myself around that time. And I have an incredible wife, and she has been the biggest support in my recovery, but we had a very, very, very difficult time. And so when it came around to my son being born, still going into those, once he's born, then that'll be it. And it just wasn't until I got real help. And so for myself, I went into rehab and even lived in sober living. And so, when my son was first born, I had a little bit of sobriety, and I was really proud of that. And I thought that that was going to be it. And I'm not going to blame any of that on the situation of being a new father, because yes, that is extremely difficult. But for me, my addiction was just was taking over. It didn't matter anything that I had in my life. My brain was constantly focused on having another drink, no matter what, no matter the situation that my wife felt, my son was dealing, it just didn't matter. And that's the real ugly truth of addiction. And so it took me going into rehab and some sober living and having to live away from my wife and my newborn son for 4 months before I was able to come back home. And I say I was able to because something my wife had to build trust in, because I had done a lot of damage in my addiction. And so luckily, while I was living in sober living, my wife and I worked through a lot of our you know issues, a lot of the issues that I had caused in our family, a lot of the distrust. And my wife had also sought help while I was away to help her better understand addiction. And so that time period of my life was very, very hard, and I'm forever grateful for it. I try not to look at it with shame and guilt and things of that nature. It's obviously that sneaks in, but it was a very hard time in my life. I mean, my last days of drinking, I was like extremely close to dying because my body was just shutting down. My mental state was shutting down. I mean, I was a shell of a human, truly. And so it was difficult. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my life today, because today I have a wonderful relationship with my son, and for the most part, most of his life, I have now been there as a sober, present father. And on my 1 year sobriety anniversary, launched this company, and I'm proud of the man I am today. But it took of a lot of a lot of hell to get there. So it's not an easy question for me to answer. And it wasn't just
No,
him being born in that aspect. It was a a lot at the time, and unfortunate timing, if you will.
I mean, that's why I love having these conversations, because you can assume certain things, but until you really talk to the source,
Yeah.
you never really know what plays out in the background. And so you said you went into sober living. One of the first questions that popped into my mind was, during that period where things got really hard, let's say the months leading up to your son's birth, did you have anyone around you that was it were you able to like talk to anyone about what you were going through? Like, what I guess what I'm trying to find to know is, what pushed it to the point that you needed to go into sober living?
Mm.
Would it been possible if you had, like, I don't know, like family or people around you, like?
So I wish my story sometimes was the because I had gotten sober by myself in the past. And so I wish that part of my story was that like I made this decision and I was like, enough is enough and I'm going to sober living. And that's not really the case. And unfortunately, because I had some sober time, I actually had a lot of people that I could talk to, that I was
Mm,
struggling. But the problem with addiction is that it warps your mind in a way that you truly believe that you are alone and you can't talk to anyone. And I mean, I got to a place where, I had the son on the way. I had a beautiful, I had a son on the way. I have a beautiful wife, but I thought for myself, they'd be better off without me. Like I am good to no one. They would be better off without me. And, started having some really, really dark thoughts. And, what was the kind of the crux of it is my mom, my sister came to visit because they wanted to meet, um, our newborn baby. And keep in mind, so we live in an area that is near my wife's family. So everyone was kind of like, something is wrong with Jeremy because
mm,
it was getting extremely bad. I mean, I couldn't function in like a daily society anymore. And so my mom, my sister had came and we were supposed to go out to lunch one day. And I had completely forgot about it because, I was not sober.
mhm,
And I finally met them at a lunch and apparently had some very low level seizures at the during our lunch out and about. And so, to be honest, the next thing I know is I'm waking up in my bedroom and there's like multiple police officers in there and my family, my wife's family, my wife, like, I mean, absolutely everyone. And so I guess what ensued after that was the officer had a really long conversation with me and I agreed to go to rehab. And then from there went into sober living. But it was kind of just like, there was just no more hiding. And for me, it was really interesting, the psychology, because I was at a place to where I was telling myself like I'm either going to get caught or I'm going to die, and that is my only
mhm.
option. And I had also called my wife the day of before I met with, I believe this was the day of before I met with my mom and my sister, and was like, I really need to tell you something. I'm like crying and bawling and like saying, I really need to tell you something. And then I couldn't do it. I couldn't find it within myself to tell her what had been going on, which is just that in itself is what scares me most about addiction and active addiction, is because there's a lot of people that are struggling out there who just for whatever reason they feel like they can't talk to anyone or admit to the guilt and shame that they have within themselves. And so yeah, so I, through the conversation with this gentleman, this officer, it was I need to go into rehab, and I did. And then when I was in rehab, like a lot of things were needed to be repaired, and so my wife and needed more time by herself, and that's when I went into sober living. So yeah.
That's tough, man. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine, yeah, what like what your family felt, like experiencing you that way, knowing that this is not the Jeremy once upon a time, we had come to learn and love.
Yeah.
But, you know, I I am glad, of course, because we were having this conversation, to see that, you did, recover triumphantly. Just one more question on that area is because like how, because those, like you know, those 4 months that you weren't able to be with your son, like how hard was that?
It was difficult. I mean, when I was in rehab, I mean, one, your body's going through an insane detox. I mean, they have to put you on anesthesia medicines. Your mind is like finally coming back to reality, but it takes weeks. Um,
Yeah,
and it was difficult, you know. I mean, there was a lot of crying in rehab. There was a few panic attacks. I mean, it was not the easiest time in my life by any means, and it was not like a nice bougie rehab, you know, with like a pool and outdoor
yeah,
area. It was like it was very it was pretty, it was I don't know, you know, a lot of concrete
just
and
grunge, yeah,
grunge,
grunge,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, it was difficult. You know, something really beautiful. You know, that's my story in a nutshell. But to bring some positivity to it is when I was in sober living, something beautiful happened. And what happened was, so and not everyone needs this to get sober. I am in a 12-step program. I found a really good sponsor to help me, you know, kind of face what had been going on in my life. And my wife and I were starting to rebuild our relationship back. And it was really beautiful because I was like an hour away from where we live now. And every few weeks, she would come with my son down to where I was staying, and we would have like coffee date and, you know, just kind of like refill out the waters, like almost start dating again. And because I had gone through something that intense and my wife had also gone through something that intense, we both did a lot of our own soul searching. And what was beautiful is that when we started to come out into more of who we were as individuals, we found more love in each other. And it was like we were starting to date again. I mean, we've been together for 15 years. I'm
Oh
37. We met
wow.
when we were 22. And it actually felt like we were dating again, which is it's not probably the norm, but it was an incredible thing for us. And you know, that's not to say that it wasn't. You know, it took a lot of time for us to continue to grow together and to have conversations that, you know, were unpleasant. Um, but as we've continued to work on ourselves, it's made it easier, and we're in a beautiful place today. So yeah,
That's that's amazing to hear. That's, I mean, you know, it's like a story. It's like a story tale ending, right?
yeah.
Um, and you know, like this whole journey, basically, it started because you went to Japan, or you went to Japan, and then something occurred there. And I want to just touch on Japan a bit, just
Mm.
because your brand has been inspired, you know, from you being there.
Yeah.
What brought you to Japan, and was there like something specific that happened there that set things off?
Yeah. So, okay, for context, so my wife and I lived in Los Angeles for like 12 or 13 years. That's where we met. That's where we spent all of our 20s. During this time, you know, I drank like any 20 something would, probably more than a lot of people, but like drinking was just like, it's the weekend, let's have fun, you know, let's party,
Yeah.
you know, nothing scary, nothing overtly saying, you know, you have a really big issue. Is really just like, this is what everyone does and this is what we're doing. And we had a wonderful time, you know, I mean, we really did. And so when we were in Los Angeles, I was working at a design agency, and my wife is a dance instructor, and we had been doing that for so long that it was like we were at this place where we said, okay, well, we can do this for another 20 years and like live a good life, whatever, or we can shake things up. And my wife loves to shake things up, and so she said, you know what, let's leave our jobs in this comfort and let's go travel for 6 months. And so we did. We went all through Southeast Asia and had a wonderful time. And then on the last haul of our trip, we stopped in Japan, and we also had been to Japan on our honeymoon because my wife is half Japanese. Her father is Japanese. He
Mm.
moved here when he was 12, and so he's been here a very long time. So my wife and her siblings don't speak Japanese, But there's always been a connection there, and I've always thought the culture was very interesting and cool. So, we had spent some time there before. So on the last leg of our trip, my wife looked to me and she was like, "We need to live here." And I was like, "Wow, okay." We just traveled for a long time. I'm looking at starting my own agency. Like, this is gonna be difficult. But I told her, I said, "If you can get us a visa to live here," I said, "I'll do it." So we get back to the US. In like 2 months, she had 3 job offers, and I was like, "Okay, we're moving to Japan," And so we moved to Japan. We moved to Kyoto, and when I was there, because I had that time to pause and get out of just like the constant like grind of work and routine, I had a lot of self reflection, and I realized in Japan that I'm not going to achieve what I want to achieve in my life if I continue to drink. And so, like at this point in my drinking, it was a very just like positive note of like, if I want to continue forward, like drinking is going to continue to limit what my potential is. And so when I was in Japan is when I first started to like dabble in sobriety, if you will. And so I had gone, a few months without drinking, and then I was like, okay, I don't have an issue. I'm going to drink it now. And then it would get worse. And then I'd stop for a while. And then, I finally sought like a community while I was in Japan. And so that's really where the confrontation to myself of saying there might be a problem here and I'm not going to be able to achieve what I want to in life if I continue to. That's where it manifested, it started. And so that's why it plays such a big role in my life. And so, one thing that I love about Japan is just the general aesthetic and the very minimalist approach to their design and their apparel and their lifestyle. So that has carried over. And, granted, my drinking didn't stop there. And it took me, after moving back to the US, a little bit of time to really get a hold on it. But yeah, it's been a big inspiration in terms of design.
Yeah. And talk about inspiration and design. So you moved from Japan and then you founded ODAAT Apparel, and ODAAT stands for One Day at a Time.
Mm.
And I love your background, by the way. When we spoke the first time, I said it as well. Like, for those listening who's not watching, like, Jeremy's background is like aesthetically pleasing. He has a rack with all of his designs, hoodies, and he has some machines on either side. And so watching these machines and knowing that you're in your studio, it's safe to assume that you do a lot of the you how do you say it? You're designing your apparel yourself. You're doing this literally by yourself. And what I wanted to know is what made you go the route of going this more handmade route versus, let's just say, a print on demand.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I had the idea for the brand when I was actually in sober living or rehab around that time, and I did some research because I was really pumped on my recovery and really wanted to see what was out there in the market that I could wear, that supported it. And everything in the market it's a lot of print on demand, very cliche taglines, plastered on very cheap clothing, and nothing fit my aesthetic. So my first goal when starting the brand, because I had no background in fashion, was creating something that I'd actually want to wear. So something that's minimal and subtle, and create a brand that's not just for people in recovery and sobriety, but people overcoming any challenge within their life. And which is why one day at a time kind of held true for the name of the brand. And so when I first started the brand, I did look into print on demand. I was like, well, maybe I can do this and just make it more minimal and aesthetic. And I had run, I don't know, probably a few hundred or a few $1,000s in samples from various suppliers. And I was just really not happy with the quality of the garments as well as the quality of the prints. So I had created a business plan for myself, and phase 3 was bringing things in-house to do it myself so that the quality was there. But once I started seeing the quality of the garments and the prints, I said, I have to do this the right way to start. And, fortunately I was in a position, from working, through my 20s where I'd saved enough money to be able to kind of launch the brand. And so I just dove in. I said, I want people who wear this, and if they pull out one of our garments and they're having a bad day for whatever reason, even if they're just having a bad day at work, they can say, I have one day at a time. Like all I got to do is focus on today. And I wanted to create garments that people it would last, and something that they wouldn't want to just throw away, and something that wasn't trendy that they didn't want to wear next season. So yeah, so I looked into producing everything. So I, bought an embroidery machine and some other machines that I use for production. And then I found a really good material and what we call blank supplier out of Portugal, finding like a really nice, heavy 100% organic cotton, and just started to do it myself, and, just making mistakes and, progressing as I go. So,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I like that just because I think there's a certain appeal that comes from knowing that someone, and that's it. And I mean, okay, other people are probably doing it maybe by hand or doing it themselves, but just knowing that you are physically the one dealing with dealing, with the embroideries and the
mm,
designs, etc. I feel like there's a certain appreciation that one gets knowing that it's not like a fast fashion piece of clothing.
mm.
Like there's like intention put in behind, each piece. Do you get that feedback from customers?
Um, I have a little bit. I mean, more so the feedback has been, you know, I love how simple it is and how, I can wear it and people will have a conversation if they know what ODAAT stands for, or I can have something that, says resilient on it, but isn't super loud. I don't, I don't really publish so much that I'm doing everything myself right now. And maybe that's a missed opportunity. But I think, one of the main feedbacks that we do get is like the quality is absolutely insane. Like I've never bought a t-shirt or a hoodie that has felt this good or fit this good. And that's really the feedback that I'm looking for, because that's what I'm trying to achieve. And, as we continue to expand and grow, obviously we'll bring on people. So I don't want to sell it as like I am the one person doing it, even though that I am. I really want to just create a brand that stands for quality and perseverance and resilience. So
And I mean, they can both exist, right?
yeah,
It's just, again, I I don't want to tell you what to do, but I do feel like it's a part of your story that could use some embracing more. Because again, for me personally, like I'm definitely gonna get me a piece. Like you're gonna see my order coming in soon.
thank you.
But just knowing that you're the one, and even if it's you or your team, the one like doing the in-house work, it just, I don't know. Again, I just feel like there's a lot more intention that goes behind it, in terms of also, just like you said, sourcing the blanks themselves, because you could have easily like sourced something that's cheap, but no, you did it
Mm,
by doing your research and you ended up sourcing from Portugal.
yeah.
Like, did you wanted to create a brand that was just cheap and accessible, or did you want to be more on the exclusive yeah, not luxury but exclusive side? Like what, like
Yeah.
how do you see that?
I mean, I wanted it, fashion's really interesting. So, and I really experienced this when we first launched, because we were trying to, push on all social media and like TikTok for one. It's really interesting because there's a lot of even big brands selling really cheap apparel for, a lot of money, but then there's also a lot of brands that are just that I can't compete with, that are selling print on demand shirts for,
Hmm.
$15. And I mean, my cost is like well above that. So, I'm trying to find a good balance of, obviously the company has to be profitable for us to be able to move forward and invest in new designs and more inventory. So I'm trying to find that sweet spot of,
Yeah.
pricing strategy that, is not, we're not going into the red every time we sell, but we're not gouging people for money, especially especially just I want to be accessible to as many people as I can, but I'm not willing to send out really bad apparel that is just
Yeah.
going to, start falling apart. So it's been a balance for sure. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, I mean it's valid because what I think I told you about this in our first conversation. I'm not big on fashion at all.
Mm,
But what I have found myself doing recently is I'm a lot more selective when purchasing, let's say, shirts,
mm,
because back in the day I would, as a student, of course, it's like you go to the what you want to call it, maybe the Primark, and you buy like 10 shirts for €5. I don't know.
yeah.
But then what you notice is after one wash, maybe two wash, that shirt is just like it's like a rag.
Yeah.
Um, and until I came across, I'm not going to name no other brands, but some other stores where it's like I'll pay 25 to €35 for one shirt,
Hmm.
but that shirt when I wear it now, um, after many washes, it feels the same as day one.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I would much rather invest in something that has a lasting quality than, yeah, just like cheap stuff that you're probably going to end up paying more for at the back end, because you need to always re-up and buy and buy stuff.
Yeah. And I think,
um
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
on that note, it's like, there's the term fast fashion, and there's just a lot of, I think some large companies, I won't name them either, they have 52 collections, released every single year. And that's because there's 52 weeks. And that just shows you like the consuming culture
Hmm.
of just like buying cheap stuff, wearing it for a week or two, then discarding it. And I mean, I didn't want to create something like that. I want you to be able to wear it. And if
Exactly.
you only buy one piece, it wasn't great. And then in 3 years, when you're still wearing it, if you want to buy another one later, awesome. If not, no big deal. But I want is,
Yeah.
what you do have, I want it to be worth, the money that you're putting into it.
Yeah, because look, I have this friend. He is super into vintage clothing,
Mm,
and I feel like it's almost not something you see anymore from, I mean, I don't want to speak, in general terms, but let's say from fashion of today, maybe the last 10 years, that there are pieces now that you say, oh, wow, this is something I want to collect and hold on to. And so I'm wondering, like, is that something that you have in mind, where you want to be that brand that in 50 years, people look at the tag and see, like, yo, this is ODAAT, um, made in the US, or made in Portugal, or made in the US, of course.
mm.
Um, and really, look at that piece of clothing as, yeah, that's something solid you wanna collect.
That's an interesting question because, like, if I think about like buying a vintage something, like I'd probably only do like, I don't know, like a leather jacket or something of that sort. I think, yes,
Yeah,
50 years is a very long time. What my goal would be
it's
for
yeah,
my goal for the brand
yeah, yeah,
would be that, let's say 20 years down the line, they pull out
yeah,
their hoodie that they had, maybe 50 years, I don't know. They say, man, I remember when I got this, I was like really going through some hard stuff. And this daily
exactly.
reminder helped me get through that. And so, I think if I was to look at the business from like maybe a different, like just a style of something, like perhaps I would want to look at it in a 50-year term, but I really want to be like a hope and strength for people at the time that they need it. And if they look back on it in the future, they can say, yeah, this did help me get through a few really hard days. I mean, that's my goal, is just people to look at it and just say, I just have today, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. No, exactly, man. I think, if someone buys something, it's like you can be confident letting them know that in 20 years, when you pull this out of your wardrobe, it'll still fit. It'll have a vintage wear and tear on it, but it'll still, represent the same message as it did on day one, and even so more now. Just to show that just as you lasted 20 years, like, this apparel is going to last with you as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to be giving you too many strategy ideas.
No, I like it.
But what I wanted to say though is this might be a tough question because you've been at this for a while and you've brought out many designs, but I'm curious to know, like, do you have a favorite design? Is there one that really stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my favorite is what I'm wearing right now. It's hard to see because it's black on black, but I have what I call the signature hoodie, and it has ODAAT and a puff embroidery on the chest in our logo, and
Wow.
then on all of our sleeves and all of our sweatshirts and hoodies, we include our brand icon, which is an origami crane, which you can kind of see the sheen
Yeah.
on there. And
Yeah.
those are my favorite, just because the hoodies are very well made, and I like the tactile feel of the puff embroidery, and I just think it's very simple and elegant, and it's something that I do wear. And again, that was the kind of the goal with the brand, is to create things that I would actually want to wear and that I do wear. And I like all of the really simple ones. I never know when I'm putting out a design. I never know what's going to work or what's not. I have a shirt that just says resilient in a vertical type down the spine of the back. And that's my favorite
Yeah.
one to wear. That's one of our t-shirts. But we have one that I literally almost took off the website because it wasn't resonating. And then in the last 2 weeks, I've sold like 50 of them. And it is this shirt that says calm in the chaos and like a pink embroidery around the neckline. And so I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that one is staying, and then other designs that I think are going to do really well, they don't, and I have to, kind of remove them. So I never know what is going to be, really resonating, but I personally like our signature hoodie the best, and I wear it like a few times a week for sure.
Have you found out why that one shirt sold so good? Do you have an idea, or
I think
because
it's,
that's interesting?
yeah, I mean, if I look at it from like a business perspective, I believe it's, we're still a new brand. We're not even a year old. So selling something that just says ODAAT on it, if you don't know what the term ODAAT means, it's not going to have any emotional resonance to you unless you have already been following the brand. And so selling items like that are more difficult, because I'm trying, like, I want the brand to be for people's, resilience in every aspect of life. Something like calm in the chaos, that works for parents. It works for like so many aspects in the real world. And so I think, people see that and it can resonate with them for many reasons. And then also from a design aspect, it's a pink embroidered along the neckline, which you don't see often on the neck because it's really hard to get like placement. It's very difficult to get the placement correct on that. So I think when people see that, they just say, wow, that's unique. That's different. It's cool. And I'll buy one. So my guess is that it'd be more so because the term itself or the phrase is relatable and the placement is unique.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know why, but when I hear the term or the phrase "calm in the chaos," I just kind of like just think on my family, and my wife especially when I'm very busy in my head. Sometimes she comes by and then she touches me, and then everything just like kind of like quiets. It
Yeah.
sounds a little bit, like, I don't know, fair. How do you say?
It sounds
Whimsical.
beautiful. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I even had to tell her, like, you don't know the impact that you have on me. When
Yeah.
when you touch me. Just like in a very caring way.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about when I think on calm in the chaos. So just like you said, yeah, everyone will have their own relatable, yeah, reason for why it resonates with them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I started a clothing brand myself in the past,
Mm.
but decided to shut that down because it wasn't what I wasn't into fashion, and I realized there were things that I needed to do fashion wise that I was just not feeling drawn to.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, like, what has been one of the biggest challenges that you've run into since starting the clothing brand?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, like learning how to embroider was a massive
Mm,
learning curve. Working with suppliers inventory management, has been difficult, simply because there are easier ways. And if I had, someone who was already importing a ton of stuff from China, like I could get, 600 shirts tomorrow, but I work with a supplier in Portugal and it's a little bit, more long term. So just kind of like always looking into the future. And like I said, that Calm in
Yeah.
the Chaos one, I just sold a ton of t-shirts. So I'm looking at putting a new order in so that in 1 month or 3 weeks or whatever, that I'm not sold out and have to, put that design on pause. Um,
Yeah.
and then I think like the biggest challenge overall is just it's a marathon, people when they start businesses, especially if they are seeking business advice on YouTube and other platforms, every video, no matter what industry, is like how I went from 0 to 300,000 in 1 month with my apparel brand. And it's like, there are those aspects, like people, that does happen to some people, and more power to them. I'm proud of them. But the reality is if you're creating a brand, you need to create a community, and you need to create so many things around it. And you got to build trust with people before they're going to invest their hard-earned money into your brand. And so, we've been at it for almost a year. We'll be a year in about a month now, and it's a long-term game, and there are
Yeah.
people that have heard of us 8 months ago when we first started, 9 months ago, and who are just deciding to make a purchase now. And so, it's a much longer game to build a brand. I'm sure you can make quick money doing other things, but to build a brand and to build a community, it takes some time, and it takes a lot of trust and honesty. So it's, it's the grind is real.
Yeah. And that's why I'm happy we're having this conversation because, and I'm going to share, these like different clips of this conversation
Yeah.
for the sole reason that the fact, knowing that you needed to learn to embroider and that in itself was a struggle. I mean, just seeing your embroidery work now, like how can you not like fall more in love with the brand? It's like yeah,
Yeah.
Jeremy, I'll be honest with you. I'm a person. No, let me not think into myself. I think when you've been through struggle and you've experienced struggle, and you look at another person and you see what they have accomplished, you have a lot more appreciation for the struggle that they had to endure, because to a certain extent that it's not easy,
Yeah.
right? To say you're going to start a brand, to get embroidery machines, and then you have to put out quality work but still learn, that art of embroidering. It's insane. Like, no, and that's why I guess most people will just go the print on demand route, right? But you wanted to build something that's long lasting, that has intention behind it. And so the fact that you needed to learn this skill yourself, and then you're actually doing it, and again, like, look at the calm in the chaos. The fact that you needed to also stay calm in this chaos of starting a business, learning all of these new different areas. It's beautiful. And again, I'm happy we're having this conversation.
Thank you. I'm happy as well. I appreciate that. And, it's so interesting. Another little tidbit about myself is, so like I said earlier, I'm 37. I have never been on social media in my entire life until I launched this brand. So
You see?
I've always been a very private, like, win in silence, and I've never shared anything online. And so what's really interesting is I have a hard time talking about my past and my struggles, because I know that these platforms can reach so many people. I know in my heart that it helps other people, but it's just it's difficult to talk to. It's like talk about. It's never easy to talk about my relapse and the shit I had to put my family through, and it's never easy to
Yeah,
talk about you know struggle. And I know that people need more of that, but because it's me and my story, it's hard. It's hard. So
of course.
yeah, and now being on social and like, I'm trying to share as much as I can, that I'm comfortable with at the time. And it's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure really where I'm going with that, but I think that, and also social
No,
media is tough because it's always like so much good, and life is messy and it's hard to share sometimes.
Of course, I mean, you're on this journey for about 2 years, and it's not to say that now you've been on this journey for 2 years, you've fully accepted everything. Even though you've accepted much of it, it doesn't mean that you don't have work still
Yeah.
to be done, right? There are still a lot of, I mean, I can imagine there's still baggage that you need to learn to let go of, and really accept just talking more about your story. Like the fact that you're talking to me about it, it says a lot about your journey. It's like literally just taking it one day at a time, getting more comfortable, putting your story out there. And I would like to hope that the more that you do talk about it, not only with your immediate family, but others that you come across, that maybe were once strangers, and you tell them about this journey that you find yourself on, that you feel the load lifting more and more, that guilt and that shame also dissipating more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does. And when I do share my story, I'll have a moment probably today, because everything's fresh and I don't talk about it every day, where I'll have to take myself back to right now. And I'll have to say, like,
Mhm.
look at where I am today and keep moving forward. And you just have today. And if for some reason I die tomorrow, I need to be really comfortable with where I am today. And so, you know, I think it's natural when we have a difficult past or difficult things from our past to have them hurt a little bit. But I really try to get to a place of all emotions are okay. Like being happy is okay, being sad is okay, being disappointed, like those are okay, because that's just the natural human experience. And so I have to refocus myself in that, because for me, particularly as an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic, if I let something like that brew too much inside, like that can very easily lead to a relapse. So I have to keep my
Yeah.
mind like really sharp and really grateful and really present, so I don't dwell on things that I have no more control over. All I have control over is today, and what I'm doing today to better myself.
Yeah. Nah, I like that. Um, Jeremy, we're nearing the end of this conversation. Like we're almost talking for about an hour, and that's about the length that I like to, leave these conversations. But there was one more thing I wanted you to touch on, was because I just think it just needs to, be out there again. But you had a little post, and I thought it was really cool because you met with who I like to call Uncle Gary, Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk. Um, yeah, you were on a call with him, like,
Mm.
or you very briefly, like, how did that come about?
Yeah. Um, that's so funny you brought that up. So, yeah, so I was at the office and my phone, notification went off, and it was a post from Gary saying, I'm going live for 12 hours. If you have a question, jump on and you can jump on a call with me. I said, okay. And the prerequisite for that was to purchase his new book that he was going to sign, which he did, and which I have. And then you could ask a question. And so I got on very, very early and was able to get a moment with Gary. And it's, you know, not always, for a very long time, I've looked up to Gary because he's got such a positive mindset. He's, extremely good in
Hmm.
business. His books are really fantastic. And it's so funny because when you think about like, okay, well, one day I told myself, like, I'm going to meet him. I'm going to have a conversation with him. Like, I know that this is going to happen. I just put that out there. But I got so tied up into like actually being able to like talk to him that now in my mind, I'm saying, okay, well, the next time I talk to him, because I know there will be a next time, I'm going to approach it differently. And for me, I I looked at it, I took it as an opportunity that when I'm listening to his podcast and I hear people do this, it always makes me cringe, because I took it as an opportunity to like quickly promote the business and like quickly, say a few things.
Hmm.
And I did myself a disservice because I wasn't able to have as connected of a conversation as I wanted to have with him.
Yeah.
For instance, I knew that his team and the ethos within all of his podcasts were very much talking about a certain business platform. So I geared my question towards that platform, even though it doesn't have any relevance to me. And, it maybe that helped me get on because it's within their, what they're currently talking about often. But I think there was a better opportunity for me that I didn't fully take advantage of, but it was a really good learning experience. And he was incredibly gracious on the call. I mean, like, I quickly told him my story and that I've been sober, and he was like, "I've got goosebumps." And I was like, I gave Gary Vee goosebumps,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I did a classic thing, and I made it too much about me and the business. And it didn't open up the dialogue that would have been better for myself, for him, and for the people listening. So yes, I did, but I have to redeem
Yeah.
myself, and I have to talk to him again in the future. So
So if you get that opportunity, and this is the last question, if you
okay.
get that opportunity again to meet with Uncle Gary, what would you ask him? What would you? Yeah, is there a specific question you would ask him? If you got to ask him one question, what would that be? Have you given
Man.
that any thought?
I have, and I'm still, so if I had just one question to ask him, the one question that I kind of want to ask him that I don't know if I would, and maybe this is something I still have to find out, but like he, I'd be curious to understand if he has been affected in his life through any addiction or adversity. Obviously, like, I know that he was born in Belarus and he came
Mm,
to the US, and, he went from, I believe it was Belarus, but he came from the ground up, and, he's obviously overcome a lot, but I would be very interested to know if he has had specific moments in his life where addiction or, things that aren't that he doesn't discuss, that he's had to overcome or to deal with face first. For instance, he started his whole journey on wine. I think that's incredible. When I was still drinking, I wanted to own a vineyard,
yeah,
like legit. I was like, I'm going to retire in Spain or something and have a vineyard. And I think that people who can drink normally and responsibly, I'm happy for them. And, but I'd be
yeah,
curious, like, if through that journey, he's, come across people who couldn't, and how he has dealt with that in his life.
yeah. That would be an awesome. That would be an interesting question to find out.
Yeah,
Apologies,
you're good.
but bro, yeah, with a heavy heart, we have to come to the closing of this conversation, and I'm very appreciative that you took the time um, to not just have this conversation with me, but also just open up and share more about your journey, because I can imagine, like you said, it's not always easy to do. But before we close off, I like to go through a round of quick hit questions where I'm just going to ask you a handful of questions and you answer them as quick as possible, 1 to 2 sentences, and then we can wrap things up. So if you're ready, let me know you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. What's one book you believe everyone should read to better themselves?
Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Alchemist.
Nice. If you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
Oh, I guess I was not ready for this. One skill. Oh man.
Only one. Only one.
To always remain positive in the most difficult of times.
Love it. What's the most unexpected lesson this journey has taught you?
That just because you create something doesn't mean that a lesson is that just because you create something doesn't mean that the journey in itself is over. There's a lot more to build in creating something like a product. There's so much more that goes into it. So it's not designing and
Yeah,
putting it out there and saying thanks. It's a lot more.
that's it. Yeah. Okay. If you could send a message to yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
I would say you are going to come into one of the hardest times of your life if you cannot get a handle on your addictions. Listen to your heart and do whatever you need to do to try to get a hold of it earlier on. And if you don't, be proud of yourself when you come through it.
Hmm. So good. What's one hobby you've always wanted to pick up but just haven't gotten around to do yet?
I'll be honest, when I'm into something, I do it. There's one thing I haven't done yet, and I am plan to this this fall, which is get my skydiving license.
Skydiving.
Yes.
Damn.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I want to jump out of a plane without being attached to someone else and to feel that freedom. And so this fall, my buddy and I are going to get our licenses together. So,
Man, okay. That's interesting.
yeah.
If you had to pick one creator that has had the biggest impact on you, who would it be?
So most people probably won't know this person, but there is a gentleman by the name of Jacob Bannon, and he is the lead singer of a band called Converge, which was pivotal in my early teens
Mm,
in terms of music and perspective. And he also does like art and prints that are very unique and were really big in like the metal genre in the early 2000s. And he's still active and alive today. And I think that that is the first person that comes to mind. I still listen to them to this day. And yeah, he's a true master in creativity.
nice, nice. And the last question, looking ahead 50 years, what do you hope people say about your body of work?
I'll go back to just I want people to look back on the body of work saying that no matter what you face, it's possible to create something beautiful. And when people also have that like a specific item from us, like I really just want someone to look at it and say, like, thank you for helping me get through this day, this time period, etc. in my life. Um, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Now that's beautiful, man. Jeremy, my man, we're at the end of this journey. And again, thank you for being part of the BOWpod, the Body of Work podcast. Again, just willing to share your journey and be open and go on this journey with me. I appreciate you being here, for taking the time out, and just any closing remarks. Like, this is your time. Anything, how you feeling, like anything.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Thank you very much for having me on. If anyone is listening to this, I hope you're having a beautiful day. And if you know that someone in your life is struggling, or if you yourself are struggling with either addiction or just a hard time, don't be like me, and please reach out to someone to ask for some help. There's always a better way. The world is better with you, and you can come through it.
All right, nice. Now, to you, the listener, if you want to get in touch with Jeremy, you can get in contact with him, or reach out to him through his Instagram or his threads. The handle is ODAAT Apparel, and ODAAT is ODAAT, and then Apparel. And if you want to support Jeremy on his mission of just touching people's lives, by wearing pieces of clothing that, I don't know, just empowers them, you can visit his website at www.odatapparel.com. I will also be leaving his info in the show notes, just so you can check it out there. Thank you for listening, and see you on the next episode.